the golden gates of a billionaire's mansion open wide as yet another maid storms out, her face flushed with frustration. Inside, the children laugh in mischief, their father helplessly watching as his staff resigns one after another. Just when he begins to lose hope of finding someone who can handle his unruly kids, a determined single mother walks in, not for the money, but for a chance to rebuild her life and prove her strength. What she does next will change the family forever. The gates of the St. James estate were as tall as the trees that lined the driveway, a fortress of black iron and gilded trim that shimmered under the morning sun. Beyond them sprawled one of the most magnificent mansions in the city, a symbol of wealth, power, and influence. Yet on this particular morning, the grandeur was overshadowed by the sight of a maid storming out, her apron half untied, her hair in disarray, and her face flushed with equal parts exhaustion and fury. "I am done," she shouted, slamming the gate behind her as the chauffeur tried in vain to calm her down. "Those children are monsters. Nothing in this world could make me stay another hour in that house." From the upstairs window, 3 small faces pressed against the glass, giggling with mischievous delight. Their laughter echoed down the halls of the estate like a triumphant fanfare, mocking the trail of chaos they had left behind. Toys were scattered across the marble floors. A jug of juice had been overturned on the white Persian rug, and muddy footprints decorated the grand staircase like stamps of rebellion. Standing in the middle of this storm was Alexander St. James, billionaire tycoon, a man whose decisions could shift the stock market, whose signature could open international doors of opportunity, and whose fortune was spoken of with reverence in every elite circle. But here, in his own home, Alexander was powerless. His wealth could buy him anything, except peace within these walls. "Enough," he muttered under his breath, pinching the bridge of his nose as he surveyed the destruction. Just enough. It was not the first time this had happened. In fact, it was the 6th maid to leave in the span of 2 months. 6 qualified, highly recommended women had come through those gates, and 6 had left defeated, humiliated, and sometimes even in tears. No contract, no salary, no promise of luxury had been enough to hold them. The truth was painfully simple. His children, left motherless too soon, had turned into wild, uncontrollable forces. Ethan, the eldest at 10, had inherited his father's sharp intelligence but channeled it into rebellion. He was quick with his words, clever enough to find loopholes in every instruction, and daring enough to challenge anyone who tried to discipline him. Lila, 8 years old, was as cunning as she was charming, with a head full of curls and eyes that sparkled with mischief. She could play the angel one moment and orchestrate chaos the next. She delighted in leading her siblings into pranks and then pretending innocence when confronted. And then there was Max, the youngest at 6, energetic, fearless, and mischievous to the core. His laughter was constant, his energy boundless, and his curiosity often destructive. What he lacked in cunning, he made up for in sheer chaos. Together, the 3 were a whirlwind. They were not evil. They were hurting, lonely, and searching for control in a world that had taken their mother away far too soon. But in their grief, they had built a fortress of defiance. A fortress no maid had yet been able to breach. Alexander stood at the center of this battlefield, feeling like a general who had lost control of his troops. His life outside these walls was precise, organized, and efficient. In the boardroom, he commanded respect. His employees spoke of him with admiration, his rivals with envy, and his partners with loyalty. But at home, all that power crumbled. He was not Mr. St. James, the billionaire. He was just Dad, a man struggling to fill the void left by the woman who had once been the heart of their family, his late wife. Clara had been gentle yet firm, a mother whose patience seemed infinite. When she died, everything shifted. Alexander had tried to compensate with gifts, private tutors, and luxuries, believing that money could soothe the wound. But children do not crave mansions or expensive toys. They crave love, attention, and stability. And as his business demanded more and more of his time, he had given them everything except what they truly needed. Now he was paying the price that morning. As the laughter of his children rang out like victory bells, Alexander felt a sharp pang of despair. He had always believed there was a solution to every problem, but this felt unsolvable. The butler approached cautiously, clearing his throat. "Sir, shall I contact the agency again?" Alexander exhaled heavily. "What is the point? They have already sent us their best, and every single one has left." The butler hesitated, then asked, "What shall I tell the children, sir?" Alexander turned his gaze upward toward the staircase, where his children now stood in a triumphant line. Ethan crossed his arms, Leela smirked proudly, and Max stuck out his tongue. They looked more like little conquerors than children, reveling in their power over the endless parade of staff who failed to tame them. "You tell them," Alexander said quietly, "that this is the last time they win. Because I will find someone who will not quit. Someone who will not run." His words were bold, but in his heart doubt lingered. Who in their right mind would willingly step into this storm? The reputation of the St. James children spread far beyond the mansion walls. Agencies whispered about them in hushed tones, and nannies crossed themselves at the mention of their names. "Those children," they said, "are untamable." Some claimed they tied shoelaces together so maids would trip. Others spoke of food fights in the dining room, paint splattered on the walls, and water balloons dropped from the balcony onto unsuspecting staff below. The tales grew larger with every retelling, until the St. James children became infamous, a legend in the domestic service circles. A challenge no one dared to accept, but fate has a way of placing the right person in the right place at the right time. And while Alexander wrestled with despair, in another part of the city, a woman was making a decision that would alter not just her life, but his, and the lives of his children forever. Her name was Emma Carter, a single mother with her own battles, her own scars, and her own fierce determination. She was not seeking luxury or prestige. She was not impressed by the wealth of Alexander St. James, nor intimidated by his reputation. What she sought was simple: stability, a chance to rebuild her life, and an opportunity to provide for her young son. What she carried with her was more powerful than any maid's training manual. The experience of a mother who had weathered storms, the patience of a woman who had endured hardship, and the strength of someone who had learned to fight with both compassion and resolve. and as Alexander looked out over his grand but broken home, Emma was already on her way, unknowingly walking toward a challenge that would test her to the core, and toward a family that would change her life, just as much as she would change theirs. The rain had just begun to fall when Emma Carter stepped off the bus, tightening the strap of her worn leather handbag over her shoulder. The city glistened under the drizzle, headlights bouncing off puddles. But Emma walked with purpose, her shoes splashing softly against the pavement. She had grown used to storms, both in the skies and in her life. Neither slowed her down anymore. Emma was 32, with kind eyes that held both warmth and exhaustion. Life had carved lines of hardship around her mouth, but there was strength in the set of her jaw and a quiet fire in the way she moved. She was the sort of woman people underestimated at first glance, only to be surprised when she revealed the steel beneath her gentleness. At her side, holding her hand tightly, was her son, Noah, at 7 years old. Noah was small for his age, but sharp and thoughtful. A child who had grown up too fast in some ways, and yet remained innocent in others. He glanced up at his mother as they walked, his voice barely louder than the rain. "Mom, are you sure about this job?" Emma smiled down at him, squeezing his hand. "I have to be sure, sweetheart. It is our chance. Sometimes, the best opportunities come when we least expect them." Noah did not reply, but his eyes betrayed his worry. He had seen his mother work herself to exhaustion at low-paying jobs as a receptionist, a customer service assistant, a warehouse helper. He had heard her quiet cries late at night when the bills seemed heavier than her shoulders could bear. Yet she always rose the next morning, stronger, determined, smiling for him even when her heart was weary. Emma had heard of the St. James mansion long before she ever considered stepping into it. Everyone in the employment agency knew the stories. The billionaire's children who had driven away every maid and nanny. Some laughed, saying it was a curse. Others shook their heads, insisting no amount of money was worth the torment. So when the agency's recruiter mentioned the position, Emma almost dismissed it. But then she thought of Noah. She thought of the small apartment they shared, of the bills waiting on the counter, of the future she wanted to give him, one filled with stability and opportunity, not endless struggle. She took a deep breath and said, "I will take the job." The recruiter raised an eyebrow. "You do understand the situation, don't you? No one has lasted more than a few weeks with those children. They are difficult." Emma met the recruiter's doubtful gaze with calm resolve. Children are never truly difficult. They are just waiting for someone to understand them. The recruiter blinked, momentarily silenced. Emma's voice carried no arrogance, only quiet certainty. Against her better judgment, the recruiter handed over the paperwork. Now, standing at the gates of the St. James estate, Emma could not help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. The mansion loomed before her like a castle out of a storybook, its windows glowing faintly in the gray afternoon light. It was magnificent, but it also felt cold, as though the laughter that should have filled its halls had long since vanished. The butler opened the gate with a reserved nod. "Mrs. Carter?" "Miss," she corrected softly, adjusting Noah's jacket. "Emma Carter. This is my son Noah." The butler's eyes flickered with curiosity. Children rarely accompanied new hires. Still, he stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. Inside, the marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled above, and the faint scent of expensive polish lingered in the air. It was a house that spoke of wealth in every corner. Yet Emma immediately noticed the silence. An unnatural, heavy silence, broken only by the distant sound of hurried footsteps and muffled laughter. "This way," the butler said, leading her through long corridors to the study where Alexander St. James waited. Alexander stood near the fireplace, his tall figure framed by the crackling flames. He was a man accustomed to control, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, but his eyes betrayed fatigue. He turned as Emma entered, his gaze assessing her in a way that made her straighten her back. "You are the applicant." His voice was deep, measured, double quotes. "Yes." "Emma Carter," she replied firmly, extending her hand. "And this is my son, Noah." Alexander's brow furrowed slightly at the sight of the boy. "You brought a child." Emma met his surprise without flinching. "Where I go, he goes. I am a mother first. If that is a problem, then perhaps this arrangement will not work." There was a pause, a flicker of something in Alexander's expression. Surprise, perhaps respect. Few people spoke so directly to him. Finally, he inclined his head slightly. "Very well, sit." Emma sat, Noah perched quietly beside her. Alexander studied her file on the desk. "You have no formal training in childcare. No certifications. No references in domestic service." Emma clasped her hands in her lap. "That is true. But I do have experience. I have raised my son alone since the day he was born. I know what it means to discipline with love, to comfort through hardship, and to teach through example. I may not have papers to prove it, but I know children." Alexander leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. "You realize 6 maids have quit in the past 2 months. You think you can succeed where they failed." Emma's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I do not intend to succeed, Mr. St. James. I intend to understand." The words lingered in the air, sharp and unexpected. Alexander did not reply immediately, but something in his chest shifted. He had heard countless promises, countless reassurances from professionals who swore they could manage his children. None had spoken like this woman. The moment was interrupted by the sudden creak of the door. Ethan, Leela, and Max stood at the threshold, peering into the study with wide, curious eyes. Their presence filled the room like a gust of wind. "Another one." Ethan smirked, his voice laced with defiance. "How long will this one last?" Lila giggled, whispering loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She looks too nice. She will not survive the week." Max, bolder than the rest, marched in and stood before Emma, tilting his head as if inspecting her. "What do you do when we throw food at you?" he asked bluntly. Noah shifted uncomfortably beside his mother, but Emma remained calm, meeting Max's eyes. "I do not throw food back," she said gently. "But I do ask why you are wasting something others wish they had." The children blinked, taken aback. No one had ever answered their challenges with questions before. Alexander observed silently, his expression unreadable. Something unusual was happening. His children were not laughing. not mocking but staring at this woman with genuine curiosity. Emma rose to her feet, addressing all three children. I am not here to replace anyone. I am not here to fight you. I am here to make this house a home again. But that will not happen unless we respect one another. I will respect you, and I expect the same in return. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying authority without harshness. It was the voice of a mother who had walked through storms and learned not to be shaken by small tempests. The children exchanged glances, whispering silently among themselves. Ethan shrugged as if to say, "We will see." Emma turned back to Alexander. "I believe we can begin tomorrow. If that is acceptable." For a long moment, Alexander said nothing. Then, with a slow nod, he replied, "We will see how long you last, Miss Carter." Emma's eyes held his steadily. "I am not here to last, Mr. St. James. I am here to stay." And with those words, the first seed of change was planted in the St. James mansion. A seed that would grow into something none of them could have anticipated. The next morning dawned bright and clear. The kind of day when the St. James mansion usually buzzed with staff hurrying to polish, dust, and scrub every corner of its cavernous halls. But that morning felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, not from the adults, but from the three children upstairs, who had gathered in Ethan's room for a secret meeting. "She is still here," Ethan muttered, peeking through the curtains at the driveway below where Emma's modest car was parked. Most of them quit after the first day. She must not have gotten the memo. Lila twirled a strand of her curly hair, her eyes sparkling. "Then we will give her one. Nobody lasts here because nobody can beat us. We are unbeatable." Max bounced on the bed, his grin mischievous. "Let's make her cry." Ethan smirked, crossing his arms. "Not yet. First, we test her. If she fails, then we drive her out like the rest." The siblings exchanged a conspiratorial glance, their silent agreement forged in the shared mission to defend their fortress of chaos. Downstairs, Emma was calmly unpacking groceries with Noah by her side, completely unaware of the storm. About to test her patience, the grand dining hall was bathed in morning light when the children arrived, dressed neatly by their governess but wearing expressions of smug defiance. Emma had prepared a simple breakfast: eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. She believed in nourishing meals, not elaborate displays of wealth. Ethan sat at the head of the table, tapping his spoon against the plate with exaggerated slowness. Lila leaned back in her chair, swinging her legs as though she were too important to be bothered. Max grabbed an orange from the fruit bowl and began tossing it in the air. Emma set the last plate down, her calm gaze sweeping over them. "Eat up, children. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day." Ethan's lips curved into a smirk. "What if we don't want to eat this?" He pushed his plate away, his tone dripping with challenge. "Then you will be hungry," Emma said simply, seating herself at the table beside Noah. The children froze, unused to such a response. Every other maid had begged, pleaded, even bribed them to eat. Max narrowed his eyes, then suddenly hurled the orange across the table. It landed with a soft thud against Emma's plate, splattering juice. Noah flinched, but Emma did not move an inch. She calmly picked up the orange, wiped her plate, and placed it back in the bowl. "Thank you, Max," she said gently. "But next time, if you want orange juice, all you have to do is ask." The boy blinked, his mischief momentarily disarmed. Ethan scowled, annoyed that his brother's trick had failed to rattle her. "Fine," Ethan said coldly, standing up. "If we are not hungry, we don't eat." He stormed off, expecting his sisters to follow. Emma called after him, her tone steady. "That is your choice. But lunch will be at 1 o'clock. Until then, you will manage without." Leela hesitated at the doorway. Torn between siding with Ethan and her curiosity about Emma, she finally huffed and followed. Dragging Max with her, Emma exchanged a glance with Noah, who whispered, "They didn't win." "Not yet," Emma murmured, sipping her tea. "But the day is still young." By midday, the children had regrouped in Ethan's room. Their pride smarted from breakfast, and they were determined to break the new Maid, Plan B, Lila announced, pulling out a box of paints from under the bed. "If she wants to act calm, let's see how calm she is when the walls are painted our way." Minutes later, the sound of laughter echoed down the hall. By the time Emma arrived, the sight before her was enough to make most adults faint. Bright streaks of red, blue, and green paint covered the walls, the floor, and even the children themselves. Ethan had drawn bold shapes, Lila had smeared handprints, and Max had proudly stamped his feet into the mess like it was a grand masterpiece. Emma stood at the doorway, Noah at her side, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Mom, they destroyed everything," he whispered. But Emma did not gasp or shout. Instead, she stepped inside slowly, surveying the colorful chaos. Then, to everyone's shock, she smiled. "This," she said, "is actually quite creative. But creativity without discipline is wasteful." The children exchanged startled glances. No one had ever praised their mischief before. "You clearly love painting," Emma continued. "So here is the deal. You will clean this room right now, every corner, until it looks exactly as it did before. Once that is done, I will buy proper canvases and paints for you. From now on, if you want to create, you will do it with purpose. Understood?" The children blinked, unsure how to respond. Ethan scowled, but Leela's eyes lit up at the promise of real art supplies. Max, still smeared in paint, shrugged and muttered, "Okay." Emma handed them rags and buckets of soapy water. And to their utter disbelief, she knelt beside them, scrubbing the floor herself. "If I expect you to clean up your mess, I will help too," she said firmly. That is what family does. For the first time, the children hesitated in their rebellion. They had turned the mess into a game of war, but Emma had turned it into a lesson and a shared effort. By the end of the afternoon, the room was spotless, and the children, though exhausted, felt a strange sense of accomplishment. That evening, the children decided to make one final attempt. Bedtime had always been their favorite battleground. They refused to brush their teeth, changed into pajamas only to slip out of them, and demanded endless stories until the maids collapsed from frustration. Emma, however, approached bedtime differently. She gathered them in the living room, where the fireplace glowed warmly, and told them to sit tonight. She said, "I will tell you a story." The children rolled their eyes, expecting some boring fairy tale. But Emma's story was different. She told them about a brave little boy who had lost his way in the forest, about the challenges he faced, the monsters he fought, and the courage he discovered within himself. She wove the tale with vivid imagery, her voice soft but compelling, until even Ethan leaned forward, forgetting his scowl. By the time she ended, Max had curled up against her arm, fast asleep. Lila yawned, her eyelids drooping. Even Ethan, though awake, looked more thoughtful than rebellious. Emma lifted Max gently, carrying him upstairs. "Bedtime is not a punishment," she whispered as she tucked him in. "It is a gift, a chance to dream." Ethan watched her quietly. Something stirring inside him he could not yet name. From the shadows of the hallway, Alexander had witnessed it all. The breakfast rebellion, the painted walls, the bedtime trick. He had expected Emma to quit before sundown. Instead, she had faced each challenge with grace, patience, and a quiet strength that unsettled him. That night, after the children were asleep, Alexander approached her in the kitchen, where she was tidying up. "You handled them differently than I expected," he said, his tone softer than usual. Emma glanced up, her hands busy with the dishes. "Children do not need someone to fight them. They need someone to understand them. That does not mean I let them rule the house. It means I teach them how to rule themselves." Alexander studied her for a long moment, his usual mask of control faltering. Then, almost reluctantly, he admitted, "Perhaps you are not like the others." Emma smiled faintly. "No, Mr. St. James, I am not." That night, the mansion felt different. For the first time in years, it was not filled with screams or arguments. It was filled with quiet, not heavy, suffocating silence, but the peaceful quiet of children drifting into dreams. And though the battle was far from over, a small victory had been won. The days that followed felt like a quiet revolution within the St. James mansion. The house staff, accustomed to chaos and tantrums, moved through the halls in hushed disbelief. For the first time in months, meals were eaten without food fights. Homework was completed without screaming. And bedtime did not require threats or bribes. It was not that the children had suddenly become angels. Far from it. Ethan still challenged authority with his sharp tongue. Lila still schemed mischief with her boundless imagination, and Max still overflowed with restless energy. But there was a shift, subtle at first, like a crack of sunlight through heavy curtains. The difference was Emma. On the third day, Emma entered the children's rooms at sunrise, a tray of hot cocoa in her hands. She gently nudged them awake, placing the steaming mugs by their beds. "Up you get," she said cheerfully. "Today is a new day," Ethan groaned, burying his face under the pillow. "We don't drink cocoa in bed. Dad doesn't allow it." Emma arched an eyebrow. "Well, I am not your father. I believe in small comforts that make mornings easier, but drink it before it cools." Curiosity piqued. Ethan peeked out, his suspicion warring with the sweet aroma. Leela sat up immediately, sipping happily. Max grabbed his cup and downed it too quickly, ending in a loud cough. Emma sat on the edge of Ethan's bed. "You do not have to like me, Ethan, but you will have to work with me. And I promise, if you do, life will be more pleasant for all of us." For once, Ethan had no smart reply. He reached for the cocoa and drank in silence. Bit by bit, Emma wove order into their chaos. She established simple rules. No yelling at staff, no wasted food, chores shared among them. But instead of barking orders, she made the rules part of games. 10 points for whoever clears the table fastest without breaking a plate. She announced one evening. Max scrambled eagerly, racing against Lila, who laughed as she balanced spoons in her hands. Even Ethan, though pretending disinterest, joined quietly, stacking plates carefully at the end. Emma tallied their points in a notebook. When you reach 100, we will plan a family outing of your choice. The promise of adventure lit their eyes in a way no bribe of money or toys had ever managed. True to her word, Emma bought canvases and paints after their disastrous wall episode. One afternoon, she spread them across the garden table, the sun filtering through the trees as she laid out brushes and jars of water. This, she told them, is your wall now. Here, you can create anything you want. There are no limits, only respect for the tools and space. Lila immediately threw herself into painting swirls of color, her imagination bursting onto the canvas. Max dipped his fingers into the paint, giggling as he smeared shapes with messy delight. Ethan hesitated, frowning at the blank canvas before him. Emma noticed. "What troubles you, Ethan?" He shrugged, staring at the brush. "It won't be good. Nothing I do ever is." Emma crouched beside him, her voice soft. "Art is not about being good. It is about expressing what is inside you. There are no mistakes here." Slowly, Ethan began to paint. His strokes were harsh at first, dark colors filling the canvas, but Emma said nothing. By the end, his picture showed a stormy sea with a lone boat braving the waves. When he stepped back, Emma's eyes shone with quiet pride. "That Ethan is powerful. You have courage in you, even when you do not realize it." For the first time, Ethan looked at her without defiance. As the days stretched into weeks, the children began to confide in Emma. It started with small things. Lila complaining about nightmares, Max seeking comfort when he scraped his knee. But soon, the deeper wounds began to surface. One rainy evening, Emma found Ethan in the library, staring at a photograph of his late mother. His small hands trembled as he traced the frame. "She left us," he whispered bitterly when Emma approached. "Everyone leaves." Emma knelt beside him, her heart aching. "She did not want to leave you, Ethan. Sometimes life takes people before we are ready. But leaving does not mean forgetting. She is still with you, here." She touched his chest gently. "Every time you remember her laugh, her hugs, her voice, she is here." Ethan's jaw tightened, tears glistening but refusing to fall. Emma pulled him into her arms, and though he resisted at first, he finally let his head rest against her shoulder. It was the first time in years someone had held him like that. Noah, too, became part of the children's world. At first, they treated him as an outsider, but Emma encouraged shared play. One afternoon, when Max challenged Noah to a race, the boy surprised them all by winning. Max was stunned, then burst into laughter, declaring Noah his new rival. Soon, the four children were building forts together, sharing secrets, even squabbling like siblings. Noah's presence reminded them that Emma's love extended beyond her role. It was real, maternal, and inclusive. Lila whispered to Noah one night, "Your mom is different. She doesn't just take care of us, she cares." Alexander watched the transformation from the sidelines, his heart torn between awe and disbelief. The house, once filled with noise and anger, now echoed with laughter and conversation. His children were changing. One evening, he returned home early from a meeting to find Emma and the children in the garden, roasting marshmallows over a small fire pit. Lila was telling a silly story, Max was sticky with sugar, and Ethan was laughing, a sound Alexander had not heard since Clara died. The sight shook him. For years, he had tried everything money could buy to bring joy back into his children's lives. And here was this woman, with nothing but patience and love, succeeding where he had failed. Later, when the children were asleep, Alexander found Emma tidying the kitchen. He hesitated, then said quietly, "I do not know how you are doing this." Emma looked up, her expression calm. "It is not magic, Mr. St. James. It is consistency, boundaries, and love. Children crave those things more than anything else." Alexander swallowed, emotions he rarely allowed surfacing in his chest. "They are smiling again. I thought I had lost that forever." Emma's gaze softened. "You did not lose it. They were only waiting for someone to remind them how." One night, as Emma tucked Lila into bed, the little girl suddenly hugged her tightly. "Promise you won't leave us," she whispered. Emma froze, her throat tightening. She kissed the girl's forehead gently. "I promise, I will not leave unless you send me away." From the doorway, Ethan watched silently, his eyes softening. And in that moment, the fortress they had built around their hearts began to crumble. The mansion, once suffocating in grief and chaos, was slowly becoming a home again. Emma's patience was reshaping not only the children but also Alexander himself. For the first time in years, hope breathed within those walls. The mansion had changed in ways subtle yet undeniable. Where once silence had reigned, punctuated only by shouting or slammed doors, there was now warmth. Laughter drifted through the hallways, children's chatter filled the dining room, and in the evenings, the library glowed with the hum of stories read aloud. Emma's influence was undeniable. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, she carried her own private burdens. She rarely spoke of her past, never volunteered information beyond what was necessary. But the children were curious, and children, when curious, have a way of drawing out truths adults try to hide. One afternoon, as Emma folded laundry in the sunroom, Lila sat cross-legged nearby, her doll in hand. The little girl studied her for a long moment, before asking softly, "Miss Emma, where's your husband? Does Noah have a daddy?" The question made Emma pause, the shirt in her hands trembling slightly. She steadied herself before meeting Lila's wide, innocent eyes. "Noah's father is not with us," she said carefully. "Did he go away like our mommy?" Lila asked. Emma took a deep breath. "Yes, in a different way. He chose to leave us, long before Noah could even remember him." Lila frowned. "That's mean." Emma smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt others. But those choices do not define us." What matters is how we keep going." From the doorway, Ethan, who had been pretending to read, listened closely. He did not speak, but his sharp eyes softened. For the first time, he understood that Emma was not just strong. She was strong because she had been broken once too. A week later, Ethan approached Emma late at night. She was in the kitchen, sipping tea after a long day, when he shuffled in, clearly restless. "Can't sleep?" she asked gently. He shook his head, staring at the floor. "I keep thinking about when Mom got sick. I told her I hated her once because she missed my soccer game." His voice cracked. "And then she died. And now it's the only thing I can remember." Emma's chest tightened with empathy. She set her cup down and knelt before him, placing her hands on his trembling shoulders. "Ethan, listen to me. Your mother knew you loved her. Children say things in anger, but a parent's heart sees past the words. She carried your love with her, I am certain of it." Tears finally spilled down Ethan's cheeks. But what if she didn't? Emma pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly. "Then I will carry it for her. Every ounce of love you still feel, I will keep safe. You are not alone, Ethan." The boy sobbed against her shoulder, and for the first time, allowed himself to grieve openly. Noah too was weaving himself into the family's rhythm. One Saturday, the children built a giant blanket fort in the living room. They declared themselves explorers of a secret kingdom, with Noah as their chief engineer. Max proudly announced, "Noah's mom is the best leader. She tells stories better than anyone," Lila added, "and she makes the best cocoa." Ethan, reluctant as always to show approval, muttered, "She's not that bad." But his smile betrayed him. For Emma, watching her son so seamlessly embraced by the others was a balm to her soul. It reminded her that love, when shared, did not divide, it multiplied. Meanwhile, Alexander St. James observed everything with a mixture of awe and unease. The woman he had hired out of desperation was accomplishing what no professional, no specialist, and no lavish resource could. She was bringing his children back to life. One evening, after a long business trip, he returned to find Emma and the children huddled in the study. She was reading aloud from a book, her voice warm and animated. While the children leaned against her, absorbed in the story, Alexander stood in the doorway, unseen, his heart stirring in ways he had not expected. It was not just admiration, it was longing. Longing for the warmth she carried, the stability she provided, the love he feared he could never give them alone. Later, when the children were asleep, he found Emma in the kitchen cleaning up. "You have done more for them in a month than I could in years," he admitted quietly. Emma looked up, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. "You underestimate yourself, Mr. St. James. They need you too more than anyone." He shook his head. "They see me as a provider, nothing more. I do not know how to reach them." Emma's gaze softened. "Then let me help you. Let me show you how to be not just their father, but their safe place." For the first time in years, Alexander felt hope stir within him. Emma decided it was time to take the children beyond the walls of the mansion. "You've earned it," she announced, showing them the notebook filled with points they had accumulated through chores, kindness, and cooperation. The children were ecstatic. They voted unanimously for a picnic in the countryside. That weekend, they piled into Alexander's sleek SUV, baskets of food packed by Emma. The drive was filled with chatter. Noah and Max arguing playfully about who would climb the tallest tree, while Leela sang softly, her voice carrying joy instead of sorrow at the meadow. They played tag, rolled in the grass, and shared sandwiches and fruit. Alexander, though awkward at first, gradually joined in, laughing as Max pulled him into a race, and Lila insisted he help her braid wildflowers into a crown. Ethan, however, hung back watching. Emma approached him, handing him a sandwich. "You don't have to hold back," she said gently. He frowned. "I don't know how to have fun anymore." Emma placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then start small. Sit with us, watch, smile. Fun isn't something you force, it comes when you allow it." By the end of the day, Ethan was running through the meadow, his laughter echoing across the hills. Alexander, watching his children thrive, felt something inside him break open. Gratitude, fierce and overwhelming, welled in his chest. He looked at Emma across the field, her hair catching the sunlight as she laughed with Lila, and for the first time since his wife's death, he allowed himself to imagine the possibility of love again. That night, after the children were tucked in, Alexander found Emma sitting on the terrace, gazing at the stars. "You have given them back their childhood," he said quietly. Emma smiled faintly, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. "They gave it back to themselves. I only reminded them how." Alexander hesitated, then added, "You have also given me something I thought I had lost forever, hope." Their eyes met, and for a long, unspoken moment, the air between them carried the weight of something new. Neither dared to name it, but both felt it. The beginning of a bond deeper than duty or gratitude. The mansion, once only a fortress of wealth and sorrow, was slowly becoming a sanctuary of healing. Emma had not just tamed the children, she was mending their broken hearts. And in doing so, she was awakening Alexander's as well. For weeks, life at the St. James Mansion seemed almost too good to be true. The children, once uncontrollable, now laughed and played together. Their grief had softened into healing, their defiance into trust. Emma had become the heart of their world, and Alexander, though still cautious, was beginning to imagine a future where joy was not fleeting but peace, as Emma knew well, is fragile. And in a house as vast and scrutinized as the St. James estate, change rarely goes unchallenged. It began with whispers. Some of the long-serving staff members, loyal to the late Mrs. St. James, looked at Emma with suspicion. She was not like the others. Not polished, not trained in elite etiquette. Not someone who came from money. "She's too familiar with the children," muttered Mrs. Green, the head housekeeper, as she folded linens. "She lets them get away with too much," added another maid. "What kind of nanny paints with children instead of teaching discipline?" Others, though grateful for the newfound peace in the household, feared Emma's influence. "The children are attached," one cook whispered. "If she leaves, they'll break again." Emma heard fragments of these conversations in passing. Though she kept her head high, her heart tightened. She had not come to replace anyone, only to heal. But not everyone believed that. The true test came when Alexander invited Emma and the children to attend the annual St. James Foundation charity gala. It was an event of glittering gowns, sharp tuxedos, and the city's most powerful people. Emma hesitated when Alexander extended the invitation. "Are you certain you want me there? This is your world, not mine." Alexander met her gaze. "You are part of this family now. My children will not attend without you." His words warmed her, but they also planted a seed of unease. She had spent years keeping her life simple, away from scrutiny. Stepping into his world meant exposing herself and Noah to questions she had long avoided. The night of the gala, Emma wore a simple navy dress, elegant but modest. The children, dressed in their finest, clung to her side as they entered the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, violins played softly, and dozens of eyes turned their way. "Is that the new governess?" whispered a woman in diamonds. "She's rather plain, isn't she?" "Plain, but clever," another replied. "Look how close the children are to her." Too close. Emma ignored the comments, focusing on guiding the children through the crowd. Yet, the judgment pressed heavily on her shoulders as the evening wore on. Emma excused herself briefly to step outside for air. The crowd, the whispers, the glitter, it all felt suffocating. She had just reached the terrace when a voice stopped her cold. "Emma." She turned sharply. Standing before her was Daniel Hayes, Noah's father. Emma's heart lurched. His expensive suit, his charming smile, the arrogance in his posture, all too familiar. Memories of betrayal, of abandonment, surged back like a wound reopening. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice taut. Daniel smirked. "I could ask you the same. Last I checked, you were struggling to pay rent. Now you're rubbing elbows with billionaires." Her fists clenched. "I am working here." "That is all?" Daniel's gaze sharpened. "And Noah? Does he know his mother is parading around as a nanny to the rich? Do these people know the truth about you?" Emma's breath caught. He was a ghost from a past she had fought to bury, and now he threatened to unravel everything she had built. Later that evening, as Emma guided the children to their table, Daniel intercepted Alexander. She froze as she watched from a distance, unable to hear every word, but Daniel's smug expression told her enough. Alexander returned to the table with a storm in his eyes. After the children had drifted off to dance, he leaned close to Emma. "Who is he?" he demanded quietly. Emma's pulse raced. "Noah's father. He walked out on us years ago, and now he shows up here, at my event, hinting at things I do not know about you." Alexander's voice was sharp, though low. "Why did you not tell me?" Emma swallowed hard. "Because it was not relevant to my work here. My past is mine. It does not define the care I give your children." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Everything in this house is relevant, Emma. My children have come to rely on you. If there are truths that could hurt them, I need to know." Her eyes stung with unshed tears. "I have only ever been honest in what matters. I never pretended to be perfect. I only promised to love your children." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Then Alexander stood, excusing himself to speak with donors, leaving Emma shaken. In the days following the gala, The mansion felt colder. Alexander was distant, buried in business, and Emma, though still present with the children, carried a heaviness in her heart. The children noticed. "Why is Daddy so quiet?" Leela asked one morning. Emma smiled faintly. "Sometimes grown-ups need time to think." Ethan, ever perceptive, narrowed his eyes. "It's because of that man at the gala, isn't it? The one who talked to Dad." Emma hesitated. "That man is someone from my past. He made choices that hurt me. But that has nothing to do with how much I care for you." Ethan studied her, then whispered, "Don't leave us, Emma, please." Her throat tightened. She hugged him fiercely. "I will fight to stay, Ethan, I promise." One evening, Alexander summoned Emma to his study. He stood by the window, his silhouette rigid against the city lights. "Daniel Hayes has approached me," he said without preamble. "He suggested that you came here for more than just work, that you intend to secure a future for yourself and your son through me." Emma's face flushed with anger and hurt. "That is a lie. I came here because I needed a job, and because your children needed someone who would not run away." Alexander turned, his eyes conflicted. "I want to believe you. But you must understand, I cannot risk my children's hearts again. They have only just begun to heal." Her voice trembled, but her resolve was steady. "Then trust what you have seen. Trust what your children feel. I have given them every piece of my heart, Alexander. If you cannot see that, then perhaps I do not belong here." The words hung in the air like a blade. That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Memories of Daniel's cruelty, his abandonment, the years of struggle raising Noah alone, weighed heavily on her. She had built walls around her past, not out of shame, but out of necessity. Yet now, those walls had crumbled, and with them the fragile stability she had created in the St. James home. Noah stirred in his sleep beside her, his small hand reaching for hers. Emma held it tightly, her heart breaking at the thought of losing the sanctuary they had found in another wing of the mansion. Alexander stared out at the city, torn between doubt and trust, fear and hope. His children's laughter echoed faintly down the halls, reminding him of what Emma had given them. But the shadow of uncertainty loomed large. The stage was set. The harmony Emma had fought so hard to build now teetered on the edge of collapse, threatened by ghosts of the past and doubts of the present. The next choice, Alexander's choice, would determine whether love and trust could triumph, or whether fear would tear them all apart. The mansion, once alive with the sound of laughter, grew heavy with silence. After the gala, Alexander's distance and Emma's guarded quiet created an invisible wall between them. The children, perceptive as ever, felt it most acutely. They had known chaos, but not this kind of coldness, the kind that threatened to steal away the warmth they had only just begun to cherish. One evening, after putting the children to bed, Emma sat at her small writing desk. A blank sheet of paper lay before her, her pen trembling in her hand. She had avoided this decision for days, hoping Alexander's trust in her might return. But the shadow of Daniel's accusations lingered like poison. She began to write, "Mr. St. James, I cannot thank you enough for trusting me with your children. They are remarkable, brave, loving, and full of light. But my presence here has become a source of conflict, and I cannot allow my past to destroy the fragile peace we have built. For their sake, and yours, it is best that Noah and I leave." Her vision blurred with tears as she signed her name. She folded the letter carefully, placing it in an envelope on the desk. When she looked across the room, Noah was awake, his wide eyes glistening. "Are we leaving again, Mama?" he asked softly. Emma's heart shattered. She gathered him into her arms. "I do not want to, darling. But sometimes, doing what hurts us is the only way to protect others." Noah clung to her, whispering, "But they need you. Ethan needs you. Lila needs you. Max needs you, and I think Mr. St. James needs you too." Emma pressed her lips to his hair, unable to answer. The next morning, Ethan, restless and suspicious, wandered into Emma's room when she was downstairs. On her desk lay the letter. His eyes scanned the words, and his chest tightened in panic. Without hesitation, he ran to Lila and Max, thrusting the letter into their hands. "She's leaving," he said, his voice breaking. "She's going to leave us, just like Mom did." Lila burst into tears. "No, she promised she wouldn't." Max, usually full of mischief, stood frozen, his little fists clenched. "We can't let her. We have to make Dad stop her." The three of them, united in desperation, stormed into Alexander's study, where he was reviewing contracts. "Dad," Ethan shouted, slamming the letter onto the desk. "You can't let her go." Alexander frowned, picking up the paper. As his eyes moved over Emma's words, a cold weight settled in his chest. Lila grabbed his arm, sobbing, "Please, Daddy. She's the only one who makes us happy." "Don't let her leave us too," Max added fiercely. "You don't see it, but she's our family now." Alexander's throat tightened. He had seen the children's joy, their transformation, their healing, all because of Emma, and yet, he had doubted her. He had allowed the venom of another man's words to overshadow what was plain before his eyes. Looking at his children, their faces streaked with tears, he felt shame cut deep. They had already lost one mother. Could he truly let them lose Emma too? That evening, Alexander found Emma in the garden, her hands gently pruning the roses. She looked up, startled by his presence, then quickly looked away. "You were going to leave," he said quietly, holding the letter in his hand. Emma straightened, her voice calm but trembling. "I thought it best. Your trust in me has been broken, and without it, I cannot stay." He stepped closer, his gaze searching hers. "Emma, I let doubt cloud my judgment. I let a man with no honor poison what I knew to be true. I failed you." Her eyes filled with tears. "You do not understand, Alexander. My past is messy. Daniel abandoned me when Noah was still a baby. He left us with nothing. For years, I fought to keep a roof over our heads, to feed my child. And I swore I would never let anyone use my pain against me again. That is why I did not tell you. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted to protect what little stability I had." Alexander's chest ached at her words. He reached for her hands, roughened by work yet gentle as they cupped his children's faces. "You have given my children back their laughter," he said, his voice breaking. "You have given me hope. I should have defended you, not doubted you. Forgive me, Emma. Please, do not leave us." At that moment, Ethan, Lila, Max, and Noah appeared in the doorway, their eyes wide and pleading. "Don't go." "Miss Emma," Lila whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan, usually guarded, stepped forward. "I said I hated Mom before she died. I never got to take it back. But I don't want to lose you without saying it now. I don't hate you. I need you." Max tugged at her dress. "We all need you. You make us better." Emma's composure crumbled. She sank to her knees, opening her arms, and the children rushed into her embrace. Tears streamed down her cheeks as their little arms wrapped tightly around her. Alexander watched, his own eyes misting, as Emma whispered fiercely, "I am not leaving. Not if you want me to stay. I will fight for you, always." The days that followed were filled with renewed light. Emma remained, her bond with the children stronger than ever, now fortified by the truth of her past rather than threatened by it. Daniel Hayes attempted once more to stir trouble, but Alexander confronted him with a warning so sharp and final that he disappeared from their lives for good. For the first time, Emma no longer felt like a visitor in the mansion. She felt like she belonged. One evening, as the children played in the garden, Alexander joined Emma on the terrace. The golden sunset bathed the estate in warmth, and for a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the children chase fireflies. Finally, Alexander spoke. "Emma, I once thought wealth could fix anything. That money could buy healing, could replace what was lost. But you've shown me I was wrong. It is love, not wealth, that saves us." Emma turned, her heart full. "Then you already have everything you need, Alexander. You just needed to see it." Their eyes met, and for the first time, neither looked away. That night, as Emma tucked the children into bed, Ethan whispered, "Are you really staying forever?" She smiled, brushing his hair back gently. "As long as you want me, I will be here." He gave her a rare, genuine smile. "Then forever." Downstairs, Alexander waited, the air between them no longer heavy with doubt, but with the quiet promise of something more. Not just healing, not just hope, but love, waiting patiently to bloom. The mansion, once filled with grief and discord, now echoed with laughter, love, and the unbreakable bonds of a family reborn. Emma had not only tamed the children, she had healed their wounds, transformed their father, and discovered her own place of belonging. And in doing so, she had found what she never thought possible again: home.